Hello and welcome to this introduction to cell biology video. I'm Dr. Aled Roberts, and in this video we're going to look at the emergence of multicellular organisms, how different roles emerged and how cells specialized into these roles. When we talk about life, we're referring to the emergence of cells around 3.8 billion years ago. And from our current understanding, we believe some of the first cells to be prokaryotic cells. So these basic cells evolved into both bacterial and our archaeal cells. Then, some 2 billion or so years later, an ancient archaeal cell is thought to have engulfed an aerobic bacterial cell, leading to the development of what we now call eukaryotic cells and eukaryotic life. Now, the interesting thing here is that prokaryotic life, despite being the first to evolve, has remained as single-celled microorganisms, whereas eukaryotic life has evolved beyond single-cell organisms into multicellular organisms, although some unicellular eukaryotes still exist. But why is this? What is the benefit of evolving into multicellular life? Well, there has to be some form of benefit, otherwise multicellular organisms wouldn't have evolved on Earth. And when we look through evolutionary records, it is thought that the jump from unicellular to multicellular organisms within eukaryotic cells happened on 25 independent occasions. So what are the benefits? First off, there's protection from predators. If you're a single-celled organism floating around on your own, you're basically easy prey. But if you start clustering together, forming larger structures, you suddenly become a lot harder to eat. Then there's the idea of a stable internal environment. In a big multicellular organism, the cells on the inside are shielded from the harsh external environment. Things like changes in temperature, pH, or the presence of toxins will only affect the outside cells. Surface attachment was another big one. Larger multicellular organisms could anchor themselves better to surfaces, whether that was a rock, sediment, or later on inside other organisms. And then as soon as you've got lots of cells working together, you start having a simple division of labour. Some cells can focus on movement, some on gathering nutrients, others on reproduction. No one cell has to do absolutely everything. And finally, there's just safety in numbers. A bigger, more complex structure is simply more robust. It can withstand damage, survive better, and ultimately outcompete the solitary single-celled organisms. And so all of these benefits together set the stage for the next big step in evolution, cellular differentiation. This is where cells don't just live together, but they start to take on unique roles within the organism, with different cells performing different roles. Now, to show this, I've got a few examples. And so some amoeba species appear to have multicellularity, but they are actually phenotypic variants of the same cell. So we have what we call a cellular form, which we can see on the left, which is observable when nutrients are in abundance in the external environment. However, when nutrients are scarce, the cell changes into a form which is similar to that on the right. Essentially, the cells are just changing how they look and how they function based on the surroundings, and many cells have developed this as a sort of survival mechanism between fed and fasting states, allowing cells to survive in a range of environments, flourishing when conditions improve. Now, our other example is Volvox species, which are freshwater green algae, and they have cellular differentiation to the point of specialisation, and in some senses it's one of the simplest multicellular organisms with specialised cells that have evolved. And that's because it only has two different cell types. It has around 2,000 somatic cells, so these are the small pinprick-like cells we can see in the cell cluster. These cells help with the core cellular functions of the Volvox organism, allowing it to grow and survive. In addition to these, there are 16 germ cells, so these are the larger dark cells we can see in the cell cluster, and these cells are the reproductive cells. Now, the somatic cells and the germ cells are joined together via a gelatinous wall, forming a sphere which is actually visible to the naked eye. And so through evolutionary history, cells within the Volvox organism started to differentiate, and at some point they developed into specialized cells. Now, one important aspect of cellular differentiation is that it can lead to cellular specialization, and cellular specialization is essentially the end point of cellular differentiation. And so in multicellular organisms, many cells undergo differentiation, meaning they develop distinct structures and functions. Over time, this leads to specialization, where the cells are highly adapted to carry out a very specific role efficiently. In humans, we see clear examples of this process. During development, stem cells differentiate into many different cell types, and these cells then specialize to perform vital functions. For instance, red blood cells for oxygen transport, neurons for communication, and muscle cells for contraction. So with this in mind, let's turn our attention to the specialization of cells and the different types of specialized cells we find in humans using some examples. Now, an important point to remember is that every cell in our body contains the whole genome, all of the genetic information required to make the organism. What makes one cell different from another is not the DNA itself, but which genes are switched on and which genes are switched off during development. And so as this process unfolds, cells are effectively pushed down different developmental pathways. Each pathway leads to a distinct outcome, and the resulting cell develops a specific phenotype with structures and functions that make it specialized for its role. Now, this specialization benefits the organism as a whole because it allows different cells to work together in a highly efficient way. Cells that retain the ability to develop into other cell types are often known as stem cells, and they are crucial during early development, allowing the body to create the 200 different cell types we find in an adult. And this is because rather than cells being a jack of all trades, master of none, they become masters of their own functions, each one optimized to do its job exceptionally well. Now, all of the cells within the human body can be grouped into one of four main tissue types. Each tissue type follows its own developmental pathway and produces specialized cells that work together to support the body as a whole. The first tissue type is epithelial tissue. This includes epithelial cells, which form protective layers and linings, and goblet cells, which are specialized to secrete mucus. Next, we have muscle tissue. Here we find skeletal muscle cells or myocytes, which allow voluntary movement, and cardiomyocytes, which are the specialized cells of the heart. The third tissue type is nervous tissue. Within this tissue, neurons transmit rapid electrical signals, while astrocytes support and protect neurons, regulate their environment, and help maintain the blood-brain barrier. And finally, we have connective tissue, which contains various blood cells amongst other things, which we'll look at in a little more detail. So we have our erythrocytes or red blood cells. These are specialized for gas transport and lack a nucleus, giving them more space to pack in hemoglobin, the protein that binds oxygen and carbon dioxide. Their biconcave shape increases surface area, which speeds up gas exchange and makes them flexible enough to squeeze through even the smallest of capillaries within the body. Altogether, these adaptations make them highly efficient at carrying oxygen from the lungs to tissues and removing carbon dioxide for exhalation. Next, we have leukocytes or white blood cells, and they are collectively designed to protect the body from infection and disease. How they achieve this differs depending on the specialization of the cell. Monocytes are specialized for phagocytosis, engulfing and digesting pathogens, and they also help activate other immune cells through antigen presentation. Neutrophils are the most abundant white blood cells. They are specialized as rapid responders, moving quickly to infection sites, engulfing microbes and releasing antimicrobial chemicals. And finally, we have our eosinophils, which are specialised for dealing with larger parasites such as worms, and they also play a role in allergic reactions by releasing toxic proteins and inflammatory molecules. And so altogether, these different blood cells allow the body to transport gases, defend against infections, remove waste, and respond to threats. In other words, they make sure oxygen gets to where it's needed whilst also keeping us safe from harmful invaders. But could they do each other's job? Absolutely not, because they are specialised. And so once a cell in the body has been pushed down its developmental pathway, it is usually near impossible for it to return to an earlier unspecialised state. This irreversible commitment is what allows our cells to become highly specialised and efficient in their roles. And so finally, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, it's remarkable to see how the human body is built from just one fertilised egg, a single starting point that gives rise to more than 200 specialised cell types. Each cell plays its part, each is a master of its own role, and together they create a functioning, living human being. And so cellular differentiation and specialisation are not just biological processes, they are the foundations of life as we know it. They remind us that diversity and cooperation at the smallest level make survival possible at the largest scale. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Hopefully you found the content useful, informative, and most importantly, easy to understand. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.